Yeah, our reading today is kind of a tough nut to crack for me. I hadn't quite heard this story, and I'm sure I've read John a few times by now, but I didn't remember that the high priest, it's saying here, had a prophecy, prophesied that Jesus had to die for the Jewish people, and so he was pretty much set on killing him. I hadn't heard that take before. I heard that Jesus prophesied his death. He talks about it a few times throughout the New Testament, right? Talks about his death. He talks about his resurrection as well. But here we hear about a priest, the high priest, having prophesied Jesus' death and seeing that this is going to help our people, or at least thinking that from this prophecy. He saw the future, let's say. That it would bring people together. Kind of throws a wrench in maybe how we sometimes think about those plotting his death. But some things are familiar, right? We hear them arguing about Jesus, saying he's doing all these miracles, people will believe in him, and the Romans are going to hear about him, and then they're going to take everything. They're going to take more than what they've taken. They're going to take our temple, take our nation entirely. I find it kind of fascinating that in the face of literal miracles, in fact, if you remember from last week, we're coming out of and off of the resurrection of Lazarus earlier in the chapter. That's where this reading began. The Jewish people believed in him. Many believed in him because of the raising of Lazarus. People were there. People heard about it. He'd been dead for days. Crazy enough. And in the face of these healings and the resurrection of the dead, the preachers, the priests, the leaders of the church, of the synagogues, wanted to kill Jesus. At least many of them did. And I find this weirdly personal, I think, for each of us, Because I feel like sometimes when that light of God is starting to work miracles in our lives, and it's very, I think, on a personal level for each of us. We can want to walk away from it. We may feel like we naturally do. Some part of us fights that light. Some part of us, that mind that likes to go down the rabbit holes of judgment and addiction and condemnation and control. Ultimately, often control, right? The love of control. Swedenborg, the mystic who inspired our tradition, believed was the key love of hell, love of control, from a sense of separation. So, sense of self, love of self leads to love of control. We all can have that. I think in our own lives, from where we're coming from as a planet, I think it's natural. We can see it in our world. It's made manifest in the wars and the trials and our distorted economic systems, where I don't think, forgive me for saying this, but I don't think people are paid equitably in their factory work and whatever work they're doing because of the way these systems are set up. The ones with coffers are collecting all the trickle down from the working class. Let's put it that way. In fact, I used to work in finance, and I'm sorry to go down the rabbit hole, but I used to work in finance. I got my CFA. I worked at Edward Jones at their home office in St. Louis. And I remember just thinking about the bylaws, because you're looking at these quarterly reports and other news announcements, and thinking about how each of these companies literally goes out of its way to pay people less, to offer less to their customers ultimately, if they think it'll help their bottom line. In fact, the managers, the CEOs who aren't doing that very well, who decide, everyone gets a pay raise, etc. If they're publicly traded, if they have these bylaws, they're often fired. They're fired because they're not doing their job. It's literally in their contract, right? To fulfill the bylaws. They're trying to maximize the bottom line. People's pay is a cost, but what the shareholders get, the managers, it's a cost too, but they're the ones controlling everything. So I find it fascinating that our entire system has become so distorted towards the selfish modalities, I think, of our hearts sometimes. It's hard to say that we wouldn't be similar if we were a billionaire. I can't say, based on my life, where I'm coming from, if I would be very different. God has worked in each of our lives in beautiful ways and blessed ways to bring us to where we are in terms of our lovingness or kindness or warmth. Same goes for a billionaire, right? They're not well supported either in terms of thinking differently. I'll tell you that. And so here we have this earth distorted on itself often. And Christ here calling us today even to heal, to raise ourselves from the dead, to come out of the pit of destruction, of selfishness, of blindness, and be whole. Sounds like a real miracle, right? Raising someone from the dead sounds a little easier than transforming this earth sometimes. Isn't that crazy? Seems a little crazier to change this entire billions of people, well, maybe it makes sense, than to raise one person from the dead. What would it take? I do think it's important, to talk with the kids about how we're open. We're an open church that believes people of different faiths, different ideas about Christ, different ideas about God, different words for God, different books, all can connect to God in their own way. We can take that Bible and start hitting people over the head with it, and I don't think that's very godly. Or we can take that Bible and see the wisdom, see the love, and let that inspire it in us. And the truths, that's true for almost everything else in life, right? And so here's Caiaphas, seeing that Christ must die, or at least thinking this, and using that to try to kill him. I think he's taking the wrong tack, but maybe, we can see that from our vantage point, right? Sometimes we're given an inkling about the future. I know I feel like I sometimes have, let's say, what's a good word? Not quite a vision, but like a sense of the future, of what might happen. And to me, I sometimes take them too seriously. They're heavy things sometimes in the future. And sometimes I think they're inevitable, funny enough. And yet I've realized over time that no, actually, often we're given some kind of inkling about the future. We can kind of see where something's going so that we can help it change. So we can prevent the worst circumstances, the circumstances that don't take the people into account, that don't take people's feelings into account, their emotions, their lives. And I think, maybe things wouldn't have changed in this case. Obviously, he did what he did, right? So Jesus was right in saying this seems pretty inevitable, but he still asked God for it to be changed if it could be, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane. But no, I think when we're given this kind of vision of someone's demise, even if it helps, if we're given a sense that, if I destroy this person, it might help. I think it's on us to actually look a little deeper and say, well, how can I help this situation without murder? It's a funny topic to have to cover. But I think sometimes that's what it comes down to. Sometimes we want control so much, and we think that our own control of the situation will make something better, that we're willing to literally get rid of someone. Maybe not murder, maybe it's kicking them out. And sometimes maybe that's necessary. They're causing violence or causing some deep trouble and it needs to be brought to light. But often, I think we want to shut people down in our lives, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our friends, whether it's an employee, a boss, whoever, that person just walking by, because they challenge our sense of what's good, our sense of what's whole, and what is nice. We come from a world that is centered on making things nice outwardly, and yet this whole system often doesn't work for people. We know it doesn't work today. We can blame Generation Z, we can blame millennials, we can blame whoever, we can blame boomers, who knows, right? Silent generation, who knows? All of us have some culpability. All of us have some culpability, I think. And maybe those who are oppressed don't have quite as much. But I think if we were totally in tune with the Lord, on a personal level, in a way we would find even now to be a light burden. It wouldn't weigh heavy on our hearts. And yet for many of us, the littlest thing can just hit our minds the wrong way. And the problem really isn't that our minds judge and want to control. It's actually that we empower our thinking to do it. We don't turn back to the love that Christ often called us to. We don't remember that, oh no, heaven is within me. Heaven shines into my mind. Heaven is the light of God. And what did Jesus call us? The light of the world. Not in a negative way. The light of God, the light of the world, the light that shines onto this earth. So we're one with this light. And when our minds are so caught in control and judgment and anxiety for many of us, fear, it's on us to just remember our nature, that you're seeing your mind. Just look at your experience. It's not a mystical thing. It's very practical. You can see that your tough feelings as well as your good feelings rise in you. You may even notice that your joy and peace starts to come from something more transcendent. But especially those tough feelings, that anxiety, that judgment, that person who rubs you the wrong way, every idea you have about that person arises in you, as part of your mind. It's part of your mind. So when we're hard on people, when we're so mean towards them, I mean, Caiaphas, he's had a vision, right? He wants to kill Jesus. I think often in Christian traditions, we condemn the Jews or whatever for the murder of Christ, which is insane. Even those who were plotting his demise to protect their country, or maybe even more selfish reasons, there's a part of us in there. There's a part of us in that modality, part of our kind of thinking. I think so. I think it's true. And so the biblical account of this is actually calling it out in us. It's saying, you behave like both of these. You're like Christ, because you're the light of the world. In fact, Christ said, find unity in me. I am in you. He said, I'm in you. Find that you're in me. But we're also like Caiaphas, we're like Judas, we're like so many destructive modalities that we see around us. We can be in a kind of mindset that maybe isn't given the tools for fruition in the way we see other people use it, but it's still sometimes there, that stemming from that sense of separation and control. And so yes, our reading is a tough nut to crack for each of us. It's something for each of us to think about on our own. It's not up to me to tell you what to think. I try to share the best I can. And so in that modality, let us rise above any turmoil in our thinking today, to notice the peace, accepting what comes. The peace that sees our sense of pain maybe in the body. The peace that a sense of not having peace arises in. Noting that if the scriptures are true, our light comes from divine love and is one in its warmth. And although we may feel like we can't find love, it's hard to build love up. It's hard to build up kindness, tolerance, patience, sometimes. If the scriptures are true, it is us. It's one with us. We're just so distracted away from it. It's here now. Take a moment to know that the God of life, of love, is one with you. With you. Not other people's minds. That's not your God. Your mind, not your God, actually. It's more the light that shines on it. It's the root of that light, the source of all. Our picture of ourselves is just that, a picture that changes, flows. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves, sometimes we're easy. Sometimes we flow with our mind, sometimes we fight it, sometimes we have some distance. Allow yourself the peace that you are today.